My child, pay close attention today, because something is being prepared in you that you have not yet fully recognized. I do not say this to alarm you, or to make today feel heavier than it already is. I say it because I want you to understand that the ordinary feeling stirring in you right now, the sense that something is shifting even though nothing visible has changed yet, is not your imagination. It is preparation, and preparation deserves your attention. You did not open this by pure accident. Something quieter than chance drew your attention here, at this exact point in your life, and I want you to trust that pull rather than dismiss it as nothing. It is not nothing. It is the beginning of something you have needed to hear for longer than you have admitted, even to yourself. I want to speak honestly about what you have been carrying, because I do not think you have let many people see the full size of it. You have smiled through days when something heavier sat underneath. You have shown up for responsibilities while feeling genuinely depleted. You have carried concerns too complicated to explain in a single sentence, and you have done most of it quietly without complaint, because you did not want to become a burden to the people around you. I want you to know that none of that has gone unnoticed. You have not been distant from the eyes that matter, even in your hardest, most tired moments. Difficulty has a way of stripping away everything except the most honest parts of a person, and honesty, even when unpolished and full of doubt, is worth paying attention to. I want to talk about what it actually means to be prepared for something, because I think the word gets used loosely without much real substance behind it. Preparation is not simply waiting passively until something happens to you. It is an active process, often happening beneath the surface of your awareness, where your capacity for patience, your clarity about what matters, and your resilience under pressure are all being quietly strengthened, whether or not you can see the specific purpose for that strengthening yet. I want you to consider what this current season has actually been building in you. You have developed a deeper capacity for patience than you likely had before this stretch began. You have developed a clearer sense of what actually matters to you, refined through wanting something and not receiving it immediately. You have developed resilience specifically through continuing to function even when circumstances offered very little visible encouragement to do so. None of that development has been wasted, even if you cannot yet see exactly what it is preparing you for. I want to speak honestly about the specific discomfort of being in a season of preparation without knowing precisely what you are being prepared for. That uncertainty is genuinely difficult to sit with. Most people find it easier to endure hardship when they can see clearly what it is leading toward. Preparation without a clear destination asks something harder of you. A willingness to trust the process itself rather than only trusting the specific outcome you can already picture. I want you to know that this kind of trust, the kind that does not require full clarity in advance, is not a lesser form of faith. It is in many ways a more mature one. Anyone can trust a process when the destination is already visible and appealing. It takes something deeper to keep building capacity. Keep showing up, keep choosing patience, when you genuinely do not yet know what all of it is for. I want to talk now about the specific opposition or resistance that tends to increase during seasons of genuine preparation, because I do not want you to mistake that resistance for evidence that nothing good is happening. Sometimes discouragement grows louder specifically because something meaningful is being built, and whatever tends to work against sustained growth in a person's life often intensifies right before that growth becomes visible. I am not telling you this so you treat every hard day as evidence of some grand spiritual battle. Ordinary life is genuinely difficult sometimes, in simple human ways that do not require a dramatic explanation. But I want you to hold this possibility gently, so that if resistance does show up during a season of real preparation, you do not automatically assume it proves nothing is happening. I want to speak now about what has actually been happening beneath the surface of your life during this long stretch, because I think you deserve to understand it more clearly rather than simply being told to keep waiting without explanation. Think of a builder who spends considerable time on a foundation before any wall becomes visible above ground. To someone walking past, that site looks like very little progress is being made. The visible structure has not yet appeared, but the foundation work is not wasted time. It is precisely what will determine whether the structure that eventually rises can actually hold weight, withstand pressure, and last. I want you to consider that much of what has felt like standing still in your own life has actually been foundation work, invisible from the outside, but genuinely necessary for whatever is meant to be built on top of it later. The frustration of not seeing visible progress does not mean progress has not been happening. It simply means the progress has been happening in a form that does not yet show above the surface. I want to talk honestly about doubt, because I suspect there have been moments throughout this season when you privately wondered whether you were simply failing, whether your continued struggle meant you had somehow done something wrong to deserve it, or whether things were simply never going to improve no matter how much effort you continued to put in. I want to address that doubt directly. Struggling through genuine difficulty is not evidence of failure. It is simply an honest response to genuinely difficult circumstances. The fact that you have continued functioning, continued showing up, continued trying despite that doubt, says something important about you that the doubt itself completely fails to capture. I want to speak now about what specifically might be being prepared in you right now, even without a complete picture of what it is for. Perhaps you are developing a capacity for patience that a future situation will specifically require. Perhaps you are developing clarity about your own values that will allow you to make a difficult decision more confidently when the time comes. Perhaps you are developing compassion through your own suffering that will eventually allow you to genuinely help someone else who is suffering in a similar way, in a manner that a person who has never struggled could not offer as authentically. I want you to hold these possibilities loosely, not as guaranteed predictions, but as reasonable ways of understanding why difficult seasons often produce capacities that later turn out to matter considerably more than they seemed to matter at the time they were being built. I want to talk now about what specifically might begin shifting in the days ahead, because I do not want this message to remain entirely abstract. You may notice gradually a growing sense of clarity about decisions that previously felt confusing or overwhelming. You may notice conversations landing differently than similar conversations have landed before. You may notice opportunities appearing that specifically require the kind of resilience and patience you have already developed through this difficult season. I want you to pay attention to these shifts as they begin appearing, not with anxious scrutiny that examines every small development for proof that everything has changed, but with a kind of quiet readiness that simply notices and receives what arrives without demanding it conform to a specific dramatic shape. I want to speak about comparison for a moment, because I suspect you have occasionally wondered why other people's circumstances seem to resolve more quickly or more visibly than your own, despite your consistent effort to maintain hope through genuine difficulty. Other people's timelines are not a measure of the value or the eventual outcome of your own sustained hope. What has been quietly building in you does not need to match anyone else's visible progress in order to eventually matter in your own life, in your own time, in a way specifically suited to what you have actually developed through this particular stretch of waiting. I want to speak honestly about the specific loneliness that can accompany maintaining hope when the people around you do not fully understand or share that same commitment to trust through difficulty. There is a particular kind of isolation in continuing to believe when others around you have already moved on to resignation or cynicism about similar circumstances in their own lives. That loneliness is real, and it does not need to be minimized, but this particular season of sustained, sometimes solitary hope is building something in you that will eventually connect you with other people who share that same capacity. I want to talk now about forgiveness, because I suspect it connects to at least part of what has been unsettled in you lately. Forgiveness does not mean pretending something did not hurt you, and it does not mean allowing someone back into your life who has shown no real change or accountability. It simply means loosening the grip that a past wound has over your present peace. You are able to release someone from your resentment without necessarily releasing them back into your daily life. Those are genuinely two separate decisions, and you are allowed to make one without automatically making the other. If there is a specific situation you have been quietly holding on to, even a low simmering resentment you rarely mention out loud, consider setting down a portion of that weight today. Not because the original situation was fair, but because that resentment has likely been costing you more over time than it has been costing anyone else. I want to speak about the version of yourself that existed before certain hard seasons changed you, because I suspect there are days you quietly miss that earlier version. The one who trusted more easily, who worried less about being hurt again, who had not yet learned to brace for disappointment before it even arrived. You are not required to return to exactly who you were before, as though everything you have lived through since then was simply damage that needs undoing. Some of what you have become through hardship is genuinely more solid than what existed before it, even if it does not always feel that way in quieter, more vulnerable moments. I want to address the fear of hoping again after being disappointed too many times, because that fear makes complete sense given everything you have walked through. Hope that has been crushed repeatedly starts to feel dangerous, almost reckless. But protecting yourself from hope entirely does not actually protect you from anything real. A life lived without any hope at all is not actually safer. It is simply smaller. I am not asking you to hope recklessly, ignoring genuine warning signs or real patterns from your past. I am asking you to leave a small amount of room for the possibility that not everything you hope for is destined to be disappointed. The way some of your past hopes were, some of what you are hoping for now is genuinely going to arrive, and I would rather you notice it clearly when it does than have trained yourself so thoroughly against hope that you cannot recognize a real answer, even standing directly in front of you. I want to speak now about what it means to actually trust a process you cannot fully see the end of yet. Trust like that is difficult, especially for someone who has learned through hard experience that things do not always work out the way they were hoped to. I am not asking for blind trust that ignores reality or refuses to acknowledge genuine difficulty. I am asking for a steadier kind of trust, one that can hold both truths at once, that things are genuinely hard right now, and that something meaningful is still unfolding underneath the difficulty, even before it becomes fully visible. I want to talk about patience for a moment, not as passive waiting, but as an active, ongoing choice to keep paying honest attention even when clarity is not immediately available. Real patience involves continued honest attention alongside continued waiting, and it deserves genuine respect rather than being dismissed as simply doing nothing while time passes. I want to speak about identity for a moment because I think a great deal of what has weighed on you connects back to quiet uncertainty about who you actually are underneath your circumstances, your responsibilities, your daily routine. Circumstances shift constantly, but the core of who you actually are has remained steady beneath all of it, even during the seasons that felt most exhausting. I want to speak about community as well, because I think isolation has likely made this season feel heavier than it needed to feel. Even a small amount of genuine connection, a single honest conversation, can meaningfully lighten a burden that feels unbearable when carried entirely alone. If you have been isolating yourself, consider reaching toward at least one person you trust in the coming days. I want to talk now about gratitude, not as an obligation, but as something genuinely useful moving forward. Gratitude tends to widen a person's capacity to notice good things as they actually arrive, rather than remaining so fixated on what has not yet happened that the things which have already begun shifting go unnoticed. I want to invite you to notice, honestly, whatever small good things are actually present in your life right now, even amid everything that remains difficult. I want to speak plainly about self-compassion as well, because I suspect you have been considerably harder on yourself throughout this long season than you would ever be towards someone else demonstrating the exact same sustained hope under the exact same pressure. If someone else had walked through everything you have walked through, you would likely admire them without hesitation. I want you to consider extending that same admiration toward yourself, rather than continuing to minimize what your own sustained hope has actually required and accomplished. I want to talk about rest now, because I think you have likely postponed it more than you should have, believing that maintaining hope meant never fully acknowledging how tired the process of sustaining it has actually made you. Rest is not a betrayal of the hope you have built. It is what allows that hope to continue sustainably rather than eventually collapsing under its own accumulated weight. I want you to give yourself permission to actually rest, not as a reward you have to earn through more sustained belief, but simply as a necessary part of continuing to be who you have already shown yourself capable of being. I want to speak now about what it actually looks like to prepare well for something you cannot yet fully see, because I think concrete practice matters more here than abstract encouragement alone. Preparing well often looks remarkably ordinary. It looks like continuing to show up for your responsibilities, even when motivation is low. It looks like maintaining honest relationships even during a season when you have little extra energy to invest in them. It looks like continuing to tell yourself the truth about your own circumstances, rather than either exaggerating the difficulty or pretending it does not exist. I want to talk about what specific practical steps might genuinely help you prepare well during this season. First, continue paying attention to the small, honest signals your own life offers you. Moments of unexpected clarity, moments of unexpected calm conversations that reveal something important about a decision you have been considering. These are not dramatic events, but they tend to be the actual substance of genuine preparation. Second, continue extending yourself the same patience you would extend to someone else facing your exact circumstances. It is easy to hold yourself to an unreasonable standard of constant productivity or constant positivity during a season of preparation, when in reality, genuine preparation often includes rest, uncertainty, and periods that feel considerably less productive than you would prefer. Third, continue building your capacity for patience specifically, since patience tends to be one of the most consistently useful qualities across almost every future situation you might eventually face. Whatever specific challenge or opportunity is coming, the patience you are building now will very likely be relevant to it in some form. Fourth, remain willing to adjust your expectations about the timeline of this preparation without abandoning the process itself. Preparation rarely follows a precisely predictable schedule. Remaining flexible about exactly when things will become clear, while still remaining committed to the ongoing work of preparation itself, tends to serve a person far better than rigidly expecting resolution by a specific date. I want to speak now about the specific fear that you might be preparing for something that never actually arrives, that all this quiet effort might simply be wasted if the anticipated opportunity or challenge never materializes. I want to address that fear honestly, even in the scenario where a specific anticipated situation does not unfold exactly as you imagined. The capacities you have built during this preparation season, patience, clarity, resilience, compassion, do not disappear simply because they were not used for the exact purpose you originally pictured. They remain part of who you are, available to be used in whatever situation actually does arise, even if it looks different from what you expected. I want to talk about the specific relationships in your life that this preparation season may have tested, sometimes revealing which connections were genuinely solid and which were more fragile than they initially appeared. Seasons of genuine internal growth have a way of clarifying relationships in ways that easier, more static seasons often do not. People who show up consistently, who continue to see and value you even as you change and grow, reveal something true about the depth of their care. People who seem uncomfortable with your growth, who preferred an earlier, smaller version of you, reveal something true as well, even if that truth is disappointing to accept. I want you to consider honestly which relationships in your life have actually supported this season of growth, and which ones have felt subtly resistant to it. This is not an invitation to become bitter toward people who struggle with your changes. People have their own limitations, their own fears about change, their own attachment to familiar dynamics, and that struggle does not always mean malice. But it is worth noticing honestly which relationships genuinely support your continued growth, because those are likely the relationships worth investing more deeply in as you move forward into whatever this preparation is leading toward. I want to speak now about the specific grief that can accompany outgrowing certain relationships or environments during a season of genuine preparation. That grief is real, and I do not want to minimize it by rushing past it toward simple acceptance. It is genuinely painful to notice that you no longer fit as comfortably into spaces or relationships that once felt like home. I want you to let that grief exist honestly, while also allowing yourself to trust that outgrowing something is not the same as failing at it. It is often simply evidence that genuine growth has actually taken place. I want to talk about what it might mean to begin trusting your own internal signals more fully during this preparation season, both trusting your own judgment about decisions and trusting your own sense of when something feels genuinely right or genuinely wrong. That internal discernment tends to sharpen considerably during seasons of real preparation, precisely because you are being asked to navigate more uncertainty than usual, and uncertainty, handled honestly over time, tends to build a more refined sense of your own internal compass. I want to speak plainly about the specific exhaustion of remaining alert and attentive during a long season of preparation without a clear end date. Sustained attentiveness is genuinely tiring, And I do not want to suggest that maintaining it should feel effortless. I want you to know that periods of rest from that heightened attentiveness are not a failure of preparation. They are part of what allows the attentiveness to be sustainable over the longer stretch this preparation may actually require. I want to talk now about what specifically might help you recognize when this season of preparation is beginning to give way to the next chapter it has been building toward. Often the transition does not announce itself with a single dramatic event. It tends to arrive through a gradual accumulation of smaller signs. A decision that suddenly feels clearer than it has in a long time, an opportunity that specifically calls upon the capacities you have been quietly developing, a sense of internal readiness that arrives gradually rather than all at once. I want you to hold space for the possibility that some of those signs may have already begun appearing in your life, even if you have not yet connected them together into a larger, more hopeful pattern. Sometimes a person is already transitioning out of a season of preparation without fully recognizing it, because they are still so focused on the discomfort of not knowing exactly what comes next, that they have not yet noticed the increasing clarity already beginning to emerge. I want to speak honestly about the specific exhaustion of constant bracing, the habit of expecting the worst before anything even happens, simply so the eventual letdown will not hit as hard if it comes. You have probably built some version of that habit over the course of this difficult season, and I understand exactly why. It made sense as a way to survive repeated disappointment. But I want you to notice something about that habit now, as circumstances potentially begin to shift. The very bracing that once protected you can also quietly block you from noticing good things when they finally arrive, because you have trained yourself to expect disappointment as the default outcome. I am not asking you to abandon wisdom or to trust recklessly. Discernment still matters, and I am not suggesting you ignore real warning signs simply because you want to feel hopeful. What I am asking is that you loosen your grip just slightly on the assumption that things will always go wrong, enough to actually notice when something goes right. I want to talk about the small acts of kindness you have shown other people, even during your hardest moments in this season, because I do not think you have given yourself enough credit for them. There were moments you reached out to someone else even while you yourself were struggling. There were times you offered encouragement to a friend when you barely had enough encouragement left for yourself. None of that went unnoticed. It takes a particular kind of strength to keep giving while running on empty, and that strength has been recorded, not forgotten. I want to talk about what it looks like to actually receive good things after a long season of scarcity or struggle, because receiving is sometimes harder than it sounds. After enough difficulty, some people develop an almost automatic discomfort with good things, a suspicion that if something feels too good, it must be about to be taken away. If any part of that discomfort resonates with you, you are allowed to receive good things without immediately bracing for them to be taken from you. Receiving well is its own kind of practice, and if it feels unfamiliar right now, that unfamiliarity does not mean something is wrong with you. I want to talk about legacy for a moment because I think you have likely underestimated how far the effects of your perseverance actually reach. When you choose to keep trying rather than give up completely, when you choose forgiveness rather than carry resentment indefinitely, that choice does not only affect you, it quietly shapes the people around you. Sometimes people you are not even thinking about in the moment you make the choice. I want to speak honestly about the fact that some of what you are hoping will change may take longer than you would prefer, even within this preparation season I am describing. Not everything shifts instantly simply because you have finally paid honest attention to it. Some things unfold gradually in stages, requiring patience even after the hardest part of the preparation has technically ended. What I am promising is direction, not necessarily speed. I want to say something about the specific temptation to give up right before a season of preparation actually turns a corner, because that particular moment, right before a shift becomes visible, is often the hardest one to endure. It is the point where you have already invested so much patience and effort that continuing feels almost unbearable. And yet you cannot yet see any concrete evidence that the effort is about to pay off. If you are in that exact moment right now, the temptation to quit does not mean you have misjudged the situation. It often simply means you are close. Closer than the discouragement in front of you would suggest. I want to close this message the way I began it, by reminding you that none of what you read here was accidental. Whatever season you have been walking through, however long it lasted, however heavy it felt, it is genuinely shifting now. Not because circumstances have magically resolved themselves overnight, but because something in you has been quietly strengthened through everything you endured, and that strength is exactly what the next chapter of your life is going to require. You do not need to have every answer today. You only need to take the next honest step in front of you, whatever small or large thing that happens to be, and trust that the step after that will become visible once you have moved. That has always been enough, even during the hardest seasons, even when it did not feel like enough at the time. It is enough today as well. Take a breath. Let your shoulders drop just slightly from wherever they have been holding tension without you fully noticing. You have made it through every single day up to this one, without exception, even the days you were certain you could not. That track record means something. Carry it with you gently into whatever comes next. One honest step at a time, for as long as it takes to feel solid beneath your feet again. I want to speak a little more because I do not think one closing thought is enough to carry everything you need for the road ahead. I want to talk about the specific weight of carrying something quietly for a long time without anyone around you fully understanding its size. There is a particular kind of loneliness in that, one that has nothing to do with being physically alone and everything to do with feeling unseen even while surrounded by people who genuinely care about you. You have likely smiled through conversations while carrying something heavier underneath, not out of dishonesty, but because explaining the full depth of it felt exhausting, or because you were not sure anyone would actually understand, even if you tried. I want you to know that being misunderstood by people who love you does not mean you have been truly alone in what you carried. It simply means human understanding has limits, even within good and caring relationships. Every version of your story that never found the right words, every feeling too complicated to explain in a normal conversation, none of it went unnoticed. It was known fully even in the moments you felt most invisible to everyone around you. I want to speak now about the small, quiet acts of resilience you have shown that likely went completely unrecognized by anyone else. The mornings you got up anyway, even when everything in you wanted to stay under the covers. The responsibilities you kept fulfilling even while feeling emotionally depleted. The kindness you continued extending to other people even during weeks when you had very little kindness left over for yourself. None of that was small. It takes real strength to keep functioning while carrying real weight. And that strength deserves acknowledgement, even if you have rarely given it to yourself. I want to talk honestly about anger as well, because I think some of what you have carried was not only grief or fear, but genuine anger, at situations that felt unfair, at people who let you down, at a version of your life that did not unfold the way you once expected it to. Anger is not automatically wrong or unfaithful. It is often simply evidence that something mattered deeply to you, that a real hope was genuinely disappointed. I am not asking you to suppress that anger or pretend it does not exist. I am asking you to let it exist honestly without letting it become the permanent lens through which you view everything ahead of you. I want to speak plainly about forgiveness once more, because I know it is one of the harder things anyone can be asked to consider. Forgiveness does not mean pretending something did not hurt. And it does not mean allowing someone back into your life who has shown no real change or accountability. It simply means releasing the grip that a past wound has on your present peace. You can release someone from your resentment without releasing them back into your daily life. Those are two separate decisions, and you are allowed to make one without automatically making the other. I want to talk about the version of yourself that existed before certain hard seasons changed you, because I know there are days you quietly miss that earlier version. The one who trusted more easily, who laughed more freely, who had not yet learned to brace for disappointment before it arrived. I want to offer you a different way of thinking about that earlier self. You are not required to return to exactly who you were before, as though everything you have lived through since then was simply damage to undo. Some of what you have become through hardship is actually more solid than what existed before it, even if it does not always feel that way. I want to speak now about what it means to actually trust a process you cannot fully see the end of yet once more, because it deserves repeated emphasis rather than being said only once and left behind. Trust like that is built slowly, through small moments of choosing to keep going, even without complete certainty, rather than through one dramatic decision made once and never revisited again. Every time you choose to keep showing up despite uncertainty, that trust becomes a little sturdier, a little more able to hold you steady. The next time doubt returns, as it likely will at some point along the way. I want to talk about patience once more as well, not as passive waiting, but as an active, ongoing choice to keep moving forward, even when results are not immediately visible. Patience is often misunderstood as simply enduring without complaint, but real patience involves continued effort alongside continued waiting. It means still showing up, still trying, still taking small steps forward, even while the larger outcome remains unclear. I want to speak honestly about setbacks once more, because I do not want to suggest that once real change begins, everything moves forward smoothly without any further difficulty. Setbacks are a normal part of almost every meaningful process of growth, not evidence that the growth itself was never real to begin with. If you experience a setback during this season, even after genuinely believing something had shifted, resist the urge to interpret that setback as proof that nothing actually changed. Growth is rarely a straight upward line. I want to talk about identity once more, because I think a great deal of what has weighed on you connects back to quiet uncertainty about who you actually are underneath your circumstances, your job, your relationships, your daily responsibilities. It is easy to let external circumstances define your sense of self, especially during long seasons of struggle, when it can feel like your entire identity has narrowed down to simply surviving whatever is currently in front of you. Circumstances shift constantly, but the core of who you actually are has remained steady underneath all of it, even during the seasons that felt most destabilizing. I want to speak about community once more as well, because I think isolation has likely made everything feel heavier than it needed to feel. Even a small amount of genuine connection, a single honest conversation, a single relationship where you do not have to perform constant strength, can meaningfully lighten a burden that feels unbearable when carried entirely alone. If you have been isolating yourself, even unintentionally during this difficult season, consider reaching toward at least one person you trust, even in a small way. I want to close this extended reflection by speaking directly, one final time, to whatever specific fear or doubt is loudest in you right now, in this exact moment, as you finish reading. Whatever that particular fear is, it does not have final authority over what actually happens next in your life. Fear is loud, and it often feels urgent and convincing, but it is not always accurate, and it is not always predictive of what will genuinely unfold. You are allowed to feel that fear honestly while still choosing to take the next step forward despite it. So take one more slow breath before you close this message and move forward into whatever comes next in your day. You have carried enough for long enough. Something lighter is genuinely allowed to begin now. Even quietly, even gradually, even before you can fully explain everything that has shifted inside you. Something has changed, and you are allowed to let yourself believe that, one honest step at a time, for as long as it takes to feel solid beneath your feet again. There is one final thread I want to leave with you, because I think it ties everything else together in a way that might make the whole message easier to carry once you step away from it. Everything shared here rests on one simple assumption, that you are worth this much attention, this much care, this much patience extended toward your own preparation and growth. You are not required to prove your worth through performance in order to deserve rest or good things arriving in your life. Worth is not a reward given out for flawless behavior. It exists underneath performance entirely, present even during your least productive, least impressive seasons. I want to leave you with a simple, honest picture to hold on to in the days ahead. Picture yourself a year from now, looking back at this exact season, remembering the specific stretch of preparation you have already walked through. Imagine that future version of yourself being able to say, honestly, that something did shift after this, not necessarily instantly, not necessarily dramatically, but genuinely, over time, through a series of small, deliberate choices that gradually built into something solid. That future is not guaranteed simply by reading these words once and moving on immediately. It requires continued, ordinary effort from you, day after day, in ways that will rarely feel significant in the moment they happen. But it is genuinely available to you starting from wherever you currently stand, regardless of how far behind or how stuck you might feel right now. Remember, one final time, that you have already survived every difficult day up to this exact point in your life, without a single exception. That fact alone deserves more credit than you likely give it in your quieter, more discouraged moments. Whatever specific difficulty you are currently facing, you already have direct evidence built from your own lived experience that you are capable of enduring hard things and eventually finding your way through them, even when you cannot yet see exactly how that will happen this time. Carry that evidence with you gently as you move forward from this moment, not as pressure to perform resilience perfectly, but as a quiet, steady reminder available to you whenever doubt returns. You have already built something real. Whatever comes next simply continues to reveal what was already true about you long before circumstances began confirming it more visibly. Let this be the moment you choose to continue being exactly who you have already consistently chosen to be. Gently, honestly, one small step at a time, trusting that the next step will become visible once you have actually taken this one. That has always been enough to keep moving forward even during your hardest seasons. And it remains enough today as well. I want to add one final thought before this closes completely. Whatever specific thing you have been preparing for, hold it with open hands rather than a tightly closed fist. Genuine preparation does not require you to dictate the exact shape the outcome must take. It simply requires you to remain genuinely open to receiving whatever form that outcome actually arrives in, trusting that what unfolds will ultimately serve you better than the narrower version you may have originally pictured. You have already proven through everything you have walked through that you are capable of preparing without needing every detail explained in advance. Carry that same capacity forward into whatever comes next. Let it be enough once again, exactly as it has already been enough to bring you this far through everything this season has required of you. Wherever you are reading this, whatever room, whatever moment of your day this happens to be, let it settle into you fully before you move on to whatever comes next. You are not required to feel completely different immediately. You are simply invited to remain a little more aware of what is quietly being prepared in you, trusting that whatever is unfolding will continue to reveal itself patiently, one honest day at a time, starting from right now. I want to speak a little more before I let this close, because I think there is real value in slowing down further rather than moving too quickly toward the end. I want to talk about the specific shape that preparation often takes when it involves relationships, because I do not think this gets discussed often enough. Sometimes preparing for what is ahead means learning how to hold a relationship with more honesty than you have practiced before, even when honesty feels riskier than the comfortable silence you have grown used to. Sometimes it means learning how to set a limit with someone you care about, not because you love them less, but because you are finally taking your own capacity seriously enough to protect it. I want you to consider whether any specific relationship in your life has been quietly asking for this kind of honest attention. Not a dramatic confrontation, not an ultimatum, simply an honest acknowledgement, at least to yourself first, of what that relationship actually requires from you and what it actually gives back in return. That kind of honest accounting is often part of what preparation for a new season actually involves, even though it rarely gets named directly as preparation. I want to talk about the specific preparation that happens through simply becoming more familiar with your own patterns. The ways you tend to react under stress, the assumptions you tend to make when you are tired, the specific fears that tend to surface when circumstances feel uncertain. Becoming familiar with these patterns is not the same as being controlled by them. In fact, the more clearly you can recognize your own patterns, the more choice you actually have about whether to follow them automatically or to respond differently in a given moment. I want you to consider honestly what patterns have shown up most consistently for you during this season of difficulty. Perhaps a pattern of withdrawing from people when you feel overwhelmed, even when connection is actually what you need most. Perhaps a pattern of over-functioning for others while neglecting your own needs, until exhaustion eventually forces a reckoning you could have addressed more gently earlier. Perhaps a pattern of assuming the worst outcome before you have any real evidence to support that assumption. None of these patterns make you flawed or broken. They are simply patterns, developed for reasons that once made sense, and noticing them clearly is often the first step toward eventually choosing differently when it matters. I want to speak about the specific value of small, consistent choices over dramatic, occasional ones, because I think this deserves emphasis in a culture that often celebrates big, visible transformation while overlooking the quieter, more consistent choices that actually produce lasting change. A single dramatic effort, however impressive in the moment, rarely produces the same lasting result as a smaller, more modest effort repeated consistently over a long stretch of time. I want you to trust the value of your own small, consistent choices, even when they feel unremarkable compared to the dramatic transformation you might be hoping for. I want to talk now about what it might mean to genuinely celebrate small progress, rather than only acknowledging progress once it reaches some predetermined threshold of significance. Waiting until a change feels big enough to celebrate often means missing the accumulated value of many smaller changes along the way. I want you to consider, honestly, whether there is some small progress in your own life right now that deserves genuine acknowledgement, even if it feels too modest to mention to anyone else. I want to speak about the specific relationship between rest and preparation, because I think these two things are often treated as opposites when they are actually closely connected. Genuine rest is not a pause from preparation. It is often an essential part of preparation itself, the part that allows everything else you are building to actually take root and stabilize, rather than being built so quickly and continuously that it never has the chance to settle into something durable. I want you to consider whether you have been allowing yourself enough genuine rest during this season, or whether you have been treating rest as something to be earned only after preparation is fully complete. I want to talk about the specific fear that resting might cause you to fall behind, that pausing even briefly might mean missing some crucial opportunity that requires your constant vigilance. I want to gently challenge that fear. Genuine opportunities, the kind actually meant for you, tend to remain available even through periods of necessary rest. The exhausting vigilance that refuses to ever pause is more likely to cause you to miss opportunities, because exhaustion dulls the very perception and judgment you need to recognize genuine opportunity when it actually arrives. I want to speak now about what specific signs might indicate that you are approaching the end of this particular season of preparation, even though I do not want to offer you a false, overly specific timeline. You may notice a growing sense of internal readiness, a feeling that you could handle certain conversations or decisions now that would have felt impossible earlier in this season. You may notice your reactions to familiar stressors beginning to shift, becoming steadier or more measured than they once were. You may notice a quiet, persistent sense that something new is beginning to take shape, even before any external circumstance has clearly confirmed it. I want you to hold these signs gently, noticing them without demanding that they arrive on any particular schedule. Preparation seasons vary considerably in length, and rushing your own internal timeline rarely produces a more solid result than allowing the preparation to unfold at whatever pace it actually requires. I want to talk about the specific temptation to compare your current preparation season to someone else's visible success, particularly in a world where other people's accomplishments are often far more visible than the quiet preparation that preceded them. You rarely see the full length of someone else's preparation season, only the visible result that eventually emerged from it. Comparing your current, ongoing preparation to someone else's already visible outcome is rarely a fair or useful comparison, because you are comparing two different stages of a process, rather than two equivalent situations. I want to speak plainly about the specific discouragement that can arise from feeling like you have already been preparing for a very long time without any clear resolution in sight. I understand that discouragement completely, and I do not want to dismiss it with easy reassurance. Some preparation seasons genuinely do last longer than a person would prefer, longer than seems reasonable or fair from where they are standing in the middle of it. I want you to know that the length of this particular season does not necessarily indicate anything negative about you or about the eventual outcome. Some preparations simply require more time than others, for reasons that are not always visible from inside the process itself. I want to talk about what it might mean to continue trusting the process even during the stretches when trust feels genuinely difficult to maintain. Trust during those harder stretches does not require you to feel confident or certain at every moment. It simply requires you to keep making the next honest choice available to you, even while carrying real uncertainty and even real doubt alongside that choice. That kind of trust, practiced imperfectly but consistently, tends to prove more durable over time than trust that only shows up during the easier, more encouraging moments. I want to close this extended reflection with a few final practical thoughts to carry with you. Continue paying attention to the small, quiet signals in your own life, even when they seem too modest to matter. Continue extending genuine patience and compassion toward yourself, particularly during the moments you feel furthest from wherever you are hoping to eventually arrive. Continue allowing yourself real rest, understanding that rest is part of preparation rather than a departure from it. Continue speaking honestly, both to yourself and, where it feels safe, to people who genuinely care about you. And continue trusting that this season of preparation, however long it has lasted and however uncertain it has felt, is genuinely building something real in you. Something that will matter considerably more than you can currently see from where you are standing today. Take one more breath before you close this and move forward into whatever the rest of your day holds. You have already demonstrated, through everything you have already endured, that you are capable of preparing well, even without complete clarity about what you are preparing for. Carry that capability with you gently into whatever comes next, trusting that it has already been enough to bring you this far, and that it remains enough to carry you the rest of the way as well.